But do not think that China is the only authoritarian threatening war. There's Russia as well. It's President Vladimir Putin seems to me a killer, and I mean that literally. I mean, we've seen Russian dissidents like Alexander Litvinenko. They've been poisoned, murdered by Russian agents. Now, his killers were filmed checking into their London hotel. Another Putin critic and his daughter, also in Britain, Skripals, they were poisoned as well. They survived, but a British woman who picked up the poison bottle that was allegedly used against them, she died. And that was in an operation by two other Russian agents, two men who the Czech Republic this week accused of striking in their country too, of helping to blow up two ammunition dumps 7 years ago, killing two Czech workers. The Czechs this week expelled 18 Russian diplomats in retaliation. And the interesting thing about all that is that the brazenness and the brutality of Putin's spies, that's one thing. Even more worrying now is that Russia has moved around 150,000 troops to its border with Ukraine, which worries that Russia is about to invade and grab even more of its territory. Russia has already taken the Crimea from Ukraine, and pro-Russian militias took two enclaves in Ukraine's east. It's like Russia and China, by the way, and Iran, they've all now figured that new US President Joe Biden is just too weak to stop them. And so far it seems he is. Biden did order two US warships to the Black Sea to warn off Russia from Ukraine, but changed his mind when Russia got angry, pulled them back. Joining me earlier was Michael Shoebridge, who has worked in our national security agencies, is now Director of Defence Strategy and National Security at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Michael Shoebridge, thanks for your time. What is Russia up to with Ukraine?
Well, Andrew, this is something we should be paying much more attention to. Russia has continued to mass more troops on the Ukrainian border. There are over 100,000 Russian troops there now. That's more troops than they massed when they invaded Ukraine back in 2014. They're bringing 15 small ships from their Caspian flotilla into the Black Sea and ships from their Black Sea fleet. They'll have about 50 warships in the Black Sea, and they've closed part of it to other states' naval assets, including the Ukrainians. So they've really created the capacity to renew the conflict with Ukraine. And you've got to think, why now? I think there are a number of reasons, and they're not all just about Ukraine.
Well, what are they? I mean, is one of them President Joe Biden? I mean, he seems like he's not offering much strength in response. He sent two ships to the Black Sea, then pulled them back after Russia complained, now asking Russia for a summit just to talk things through. Is that one of the factors that Russia thinks that President Biden is weak?
I think they're wanting to test the new US president. We saw China do that around Taiwan. They're also wanting to use this moment to say, don't forget about Russian power. So it's a moment for the new US president and NATO and big powers in Europe like Germany and France to stand up. Because if they don't oppose this Russian move, then the prospects of Putin acting are higher. So it's time for the US, NATO, Germany and France to show their words matter. But I think the bigger reasons that Russia's acting beyond that are Russia's under a whole lot of international pressure now. There are sanctions against Russia because of their SolarWinds hack, that giant cyber hack, global cyber hack. The Ukrainian government's put sanctions on about 80 Russian companies and some Russian officials. And we're right in the middle of the finalisation of the Nord Stream pipeline. Putin needs to distract from things at home. His main domestic critic, Alexei Navalny, is on a hunger strike, and his supporters are calling for mass protests. All of this adds up to Putin thinking maybe use of the military is a great way to distract from these growing problems and solidify support at home.
What's the worst that can happen, Michael?
Well, the worst is a further Russian invasion of Ukrainian territory. maybe taking control of those Russian separatist enclaves, maybe expanding territorial control there, and putting a very naked challenge in front of the US and NATO. I think the thing that might hold Putin back actually is the Nord Stream pipeline. This multi-billion-dollar deal with the Germans to bypass Ukraine with an undersea gas pipeline, that there seems almost no way Merkel could complete that deal if he acts militarily against Ukraine in that way.
Now, you mentioned Navalny. That's the Russian opposition leader who was first poisoned. His underpants were poisoned, bizarrely enough, nearly killed. Then he was sent to jail. He was on a hunger strike. This goes to another point about the aggression of this regime to its critics, and also the aggression of its secret agents. We've got the Czech Republic this week, or the last couple of days, blaming Russian agents for blowing up 2 of its ammunition dumps a few years ago. Russia under Vladimir Putin seems unbelievably aggressive and also, well, almost blatant about it. What is going on here?
Well, it's about Russia, Putin saying to his own people and to the world, anyone who's discounting Russian power needs to understand the power we have and, more importantly, my political will to use it. He used the same nerve agent against Navalny in the underpants that he used against that former Russian spy and his daughter in Salisbury in the UK. You can't get any more flagrant than that. The 2 Russian military intelligence agents that did the poisoning in the UK seem to be the 2 that blew up those arms dumps in the Czech Republic. So he's out and proud because there haven't been consequences. That's why I think the Nord Stream pipeline is a much more strategic issue, because it's a real consequence that could be imposed on Russia.
And finally, New Zealand's foreign minister says she won't be joining the other Five Eyes countries, which include the US and Australia, in jointly confronting China. She cites as one of her inspirations a Maori mythological animal. What's happening here?
I think the New Zealand-China policy is frozen in time. It's like an insect preserved in amber from a past time. That policy of respectful, quiet engagement of Beijing, talking about security issues and human rights quietly behind closed doors, comprehensively failed with every other country on the planet that has tried that with Beijing. It will fail for New Zealand too. I would suspect that a whole bunch of New Zealand government officials, and maybe some of their ministers, know it, but it's a little bit of an underhand way of preserving a trade relationship at everybody else's expense. So I don't see it as high-flown New Zealand sentiment. I see it as lazy thinking and maybe even a bit of an underhanded way of taking an easy path. I think it's going to catch them out, and I think there's a real risk to their position in the Five Eyes partnership.
Michael Shoebridge, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.